Well, welcome, Peter. Thank you for being here.
Thanks very much, Sean. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. So you've had a long, distinguished career in TV. So where did it all start? When did you want to perform? When did you first realise?
Well, I came from a family. My father was a singer. He was actually a tailor, but he was a very good singer as well. Had a fine bass voice, and as a boy soprano, he actually used to broadcast on the radio. Had an afternoon show, and he had a wonderful voice. And so, I suppose it's always been in me a bit. But we lived in Blackpool, and Blackpool was the mecca of show business, and I was at school there. And when I was cast in a play at school at the age of 9, that was when it all sort of clicked in, because I'd seen a lot of shows in Blackpool and continued to do so. In the summer, of course, it was the mecca of show business, really.
Hmm.
And I knew that one could, there were so many different varieties you could go. There was music hall, there were plays, there was opera, there was musical shows, there was circus, the whole gamut. And it was all there in Blackpool. They had something like 17 theatres
Hmm.
at that time. So it was an amazing place to grow up. And that's really where I got the bug. And that was the age of 9, and I've never wanted to do anything else.
So how did that lead to becoming a professional actor?
Um, well, look, I was 17, and in my school holidays, I went down to the local theatre in Barrow-in-Furness, where my parents had moved to. I was still at boarding school in Blackpool, but I wandered down to the theatre and knocked on the door and asked to see the artistic director, very cheeky, and said, "Can I audition?" He said, "Yeah, okay." And I went away and learned, well, I'd prepared them already, but I made an appointment. I went to see him, I auditioned, and he cast me in a couple of plays during my summer holidays. And I actually got paid, so I was professional at the age of 17. I only got paid £5 a week, but that was something. And yeah, and that was when it all started. When I went to college, I ran the Dramatic Society for a year. I was in the Dramatic Society for a year, then I ran it for a year. I also had my own band. At least I was the singer in a band with 4 other great guys who I'm still in touch with. Well, not
Mhm.
all of them. Sadly, two are no longer alive, but my drummer is still going strong. He lives in Canada,
Mhm.
and the lead guitarist lives in Anglesey. And so we have had reunions for that. Um, and at college, I did a lot of acting, didn't do a lot of work. And when I taught for a year in London to get my full qualification as a teacher, I just gave it up. I said, no, I'm not going to do this anymore. I started wearing out shoe leather. And I got a message from the theatre in Barrow where I had been and auditioned as a young man. And they said, I don't know if you remember telegrams, I think you're probably too young. Anyway, I got a telegram saying, if you're serious, there's a job for you here. And I
Hmm.
mean, that was gold, because I wasn't in equity. I'd got an agent, didn't, and I went up to Barrow-in-Furness, back to where my parents lived. I was able to have digs with them. That was great for the first year.
Yeah.
And I did 2 years in rep, and it was a weekly repertory. And
Yeah.
I performed in something like 96 plays during that time. So
Wow.
it was, yeah, that was my learning, and that's my dog, Bertie. There he is in the background, bless him.
Do you think your time in Red gave you a really good grounding for your future TV work?
Say that again.
Sorry, do you think your time in rep gave you a very good grounding for your future TV work?
Well, it made it, the easy thing was it taught me how to learn lines very quickly.
Hmm.
And so I never had a problem with that. And I started off in the chorus as a singer at the London Palladium. I had a good tenor voice. I was one of the 2 top tenors in a group of singers called the Derek Taverner Singers, and we were at the Palladium for a season. Excuse me. And I started getting television work after that, but it was only very spasmodic. I had a small part in Z Cars, which was a police drama on television on the BBC back in the 60s. And then I got a few other odd jobs, bits in there was a series called Red Cap and Court Martial, and I was in a program called Gideon's Way, and I did a small cameo in A World of Worcester. And eventually I got a lead in a television play, which was
Hmm.
about Blackpool, believe it or not. And I was a beach photographer. It was a leading role. My co-star was Nicola Paget. It was our first leading roles, both of
Hmm.
us. And well, it went on from there. Eventually, getting Doctor Who, that was the sort of jewel in the crown, if you like, and that was in 1965. And when I joined the show there, I was playing a cameo role. I'm sure you know a character called Morton Dill in an episode of The Chase, episode 3, and he was a hillbilly. He was nothing like the character I eventually played in Doctor Who, but 3 weeks after that, I was in the show full time playing Stephen Taylor, and the Bill Hartnell. He was largely responsible for me getting that job because he asked, on the advice of Maureen O'Brien, he went to Verity Lambert, the producer of Doctor Who, and said, well, Russ and Jackie are leaving in 3 weeks. We haven't got a replacement yet. What about this boy? And I got the part. So I'm very, very thankful to Bill for seeing what talent I had.
How did it work in terms of rehearsal for Doctor Who? Did you rehearse on set, or was it somewhere else? Or
Um, my career was going all right, but I mean, it was spasmodic. You didn't work
yeah,
very much. And I wasn't earning much money. In fact, when I did Doctor Who, I wasn't earning much money. I mean, they paid peanuts. It was terrible. But it was a major job, and it was a television series, so you wouldn't turn it down. And I did it for a year, and I would have stayed longer, but they didn't want me anymore. The producer changed 3 times whilst I'd been on the show. It
hmm.
was a real state of flux. There'd been so many different girls coming in, being the companion and disappearing, and that. And in the end, I was another one that went by the wayside. And of course, shortly afterwards, so did Bill. So
Yeah.
it was not a great time for me. After that, I didn't really work much. I did again a couple of episodes of Z Cars with directors who I'd worked with. I did a color test for Dougie Camfield. He was doing his color test as a director for the BBC. We did a segment of the play Ross, which was the story of Lawrence of Arabia, of course. Well, not
Hmm.
the story of that, but it was the story of Lawrence. And I played Lawrence for him. So that was good, but it didn't put much money in the bank. And I was driving trucks and doing all sorts of stuff. And out of the blue, I was asked for by the producers of Blue Peter. They asked to see me, and consequently, I went along to see them, and I got the job. No agents involved. They'd abandoned me because they couldn't get me any other work. But they did put me in touch with the Blue Peter office and said if I want to ring and speak to them, then they would like to see me. So I went and saw them, and I got the job.
Hmm. So, what was it like going into presenting? Because it's a different kettle of fish, isn't it, to acting? Did you find it quite difficult at first?
Oh, it was totally different. I found it quite difficult. My mate Johnny Noakes, he never mastered that. He invented a character to play
Hmm.
called John Noakes. So the character you saw of John on screen was not really him off screen. I
Yeah.
don't think I was any different, but you had to not act. That was the important thing. You know, the whole point about presenting is you've got to be real. People have got to believe that you're talking to them and you're not pretending something, because acting is all pretense.
Yeah.
And you have to stop doing that. It took me a good time to get it right. I thought about 6 months. I think the producers thought it was about 2 years, but it was one of those things. Eventually, you got there. And of course, I stayed on the show for 10 years,
Hmm.
10 and a half years, and it was a great time in my life. I loved it, and otherwise, I wouldn't have stayed there that long. I left of my own volition eventually. But
Yeah.
I mean, it was the best job in television. It was very badly paid. It was fairly hard work. It wasn't not you weren't down the pit way. You weren't having, you weren't having to do hard labour. And the nice thing about the job, and the best thing about Blue Peter, was that you dropped into the best parts of other people's lives
Mm.
without having to do apprenticeship and learning and all the rest. So if you want to drive a steam train, I've driven a steam train. Been
Yeah.
on the later the Blue Peter and the Flying Scotsman. I've driven diesel trains. I've had fun. I've flown in aeroplanes. We're doing something with air traffic control with the RAF at Shawbury in Shropshire, I think it is, or just in Wales, and I was up in the planes. Johnny Noakes was doing the air traffic control stuff, talking the planes down, and I was up in a Vampire jet, a two-seater,
Mm.
having a wonderful time, being allowed to handle the controls. And we were called back actually by a rather angry sounding controller down on the ground saying, "Will the Shawbury Air Display Team please return to..." But yeah, I mean, all those things. I piloted, I had the helm of the QE2 sailing across to France. All sorts of things that you did, which no one else gets the chance to do. It was a joy, an absolute joy.
There were some that looked, some of the things you did were really dangerous looking. So, you went rock climbing with Chris Bonington, for example. Did you ever feel that you were ever in actual physical danger at any point?
Um, Only natural fear.
Yeah.
I had rock climbed before.
Right.
I rock climbed when at the weekends when I was in repertory in Barrow and Furnace. I mean, some of those times were, I'm sure, I probably thought even back then they're not going to have a cast for the play next week because I fell off a crag somewhere in the Lake District. But I had climbed before, so that was all right. But yeah, there were difficult times. I mean, there was one bit I was stuck on a climb. It was a climb that was classified as severe at that time. That was the classification. People climb far more dangerous stuff now. But it was on Black Crag in Borrowdale. And I reached a point where I literally could not find what other move was. How do I get across from here? And our cameraman, Mick Burke, who sadly, was a lovely man, a brilliant cameraman, sadly he died on the Everest expedition that Chris Bonington took. He passed two of the climbers on the way back from the summit as he was going up, and he was never seen again. But he was a brilliant climber, and he was climbing virtually one-handed with a sack of film canisters over his shoulder and an Eclair camera that he was shooting me and the rest of the climb with. And he was giving me instructions. He said, "Come on, Pete, you can do it. It's just up there on the left. Reach a bit, push." So at times like that, you were feeling, I'm pretty inadequate at this. I'm not brilliant at it. And yes, that was worrying. I did a series of a couple of films with a crew called the Destruction Screw. I'll say it again. The Destruction Squad.
Oh,
And
right.
they were a team of stunt drivers who weren't terribly well prepared up in Leicestershire. And I drove a car through a furniture van, up a ramp and through the side of it and all the rest of it. I was aware at the moment before I hit the ramp to go through it and do this absurd crashing beyond. This is probably not the wise thing to be doing, but I did it. You finish. I wasn't hurt, so all right.
Go down to the end of the field, turn around. I stopped the car at the end of the field to put my visor down over my eyes and tied the scarf around my mouth. I put the car into first gear and began the run-up. There was no turning back now. The speed now increasing. 20 miles an hour on the speedo. That's probably wrong, but it is getting up. We're doing about 25 now. Probably 30. I'm going up into third gear now. Heading straight for the ramp. I'm lined up with the ramp, and here I go. the second before you hit the ramp. You want to go straight back. You don't want to do it. I thought I was going over the top of it.
I could hardly believe I was in one piece, but it had happened just the way John told me it would. But you wouldn't get me to do it again, not for all the tea in China.
But yes, there were times. I mean, I climbed the cable on the Forth Road Bridge, which is a suspension bridge, and the first one, not the new one now, but the not the railway bridge, the suspension bridge, which is the road bridge, and I went with the bridge inspector, bridge manager. He used to do that regularly. He used to walk the cable to check that everything was all right. And it's quite a climb. And there's nothing, well, you can hold on because whilst the actual tube that you're walking on, this is a tube, so it's not flat. You're walking up at something that's curved. That suspension cable, which is all inside this metal case, there are hawsers and cables up the side, so you can hold on.
Yeah.
So up you go, up you go, up. But every 10 yards or so, you come to a point where there's a stanchion. Well, you have to, if you were tied on, you would have to unclip, which means both hands, unclip, come round the stanchion, clip on and go. So we didn't do that. We had the carabiners, we had the stuff to do that. Right. And at one point we had to stop halfway up whilst the camera moved from where we'd set off on the bridge to go down to South Queensferry to get the long shot of us up like ants on this cable. And that we were there for half an hour, just standing there halfway up the climb. That was scary in its way. But the funny thing is that once you get to a certain height, you've nothing to, when you can't see the ground anymore, except the sea, you've nothing to relate it to. So you don't even feel that you're very high up. It's just one of those things.
To the end of the road, keep right on to the end. If the way be long, let your heart be strong. Keep right on round the bend. If you're tired and weary, still journey on till you come to your happy abode, where all you love and you're dreaming of will be there at the end of the road.
But yeah, there were scary moments always, and as I discovered and Johnny discovered first, we weren't insured. The BBC had not insured us for any of that work at all. I mean, it was criminal, I think, but there we go. And you know, we won't go there.
How was Biddy Baxter to her, though? Because she's got a bit of a fearsome reputation, hasn't she?
Well, I never got on with her terribly well, but I mean, it was a working relationship, and for the most part, you could just do the work. Occasionally, you got very angry with her, and you found it very difficult and very obstructive and not very helpful. Rarely very complimentary. So you never felt. The one thing I never felt was in the 10.5 years, I have to say, I never felt valued. And that's not right. You know, you should, when you're doing work like that, you should feel that they value your presence. But every year when it came around to the contract, it was a question of take it or leave it. There was no negotiation. There was a slight raise of money, which didn't make the heart pulse beat any faster. I mean, it was just, you know, and it was take it or leave it. And you never felt, oh, they really want me to stay. In fact, when I left, and I said they did give me other work. I mean, at least Edward Barnes gave me 3 series to do, which was you know, he didn't have to do that. So I mean, they obviously did value my work, but they never really showed it at the time.
Yeah. So the elephant episode, that's quite a famous episode, isn't it? You know, where the baby elephant runs amok.
Very early on, it was in the summer of 1968, and we were just about to go to Sri Lanka. It must have been 79, We're just about to, then it was called Ceylon, and we're just about to go on the summer trip. I know it was in black and white still, and it was a just, you know, we're going to meet elephants in Ceylon, so we'll have one in the studio. We had a baby elephant brought in from Chessington Zoo, and you know the story. Most people have seen it. It's one of the most well seen and impossible to imagine scripting. It was never scripted. It just happened. And the elephant, when it decided it would do whatever it wanted to do, it just did it, and we worked around that, or right in it, as John Noakes would claim. He never actually trod in anything nasty, but he always pretended he did. I mean, anything for a laugh with John. So that was the whole thing. He was a good lad, great friend. I miss him.
And see if that'll come here, Lulu.
Settle her down.
There you are. There's a bucket of water.
I've been feeding her.
Well, at the moment she has 12 pints of milk a day and 2 buckets of water. But when she's fully grown, she'll have 50 gallons a day, and I wouldn't like to be the one who has to give her all that. And you'll notice that she hasn't got any tusks. And actually, in Ceylon, even the male elephants don't have tusks.
Oh,
and,
we're having a slight twenty down here. Slight problem.
Get out of the way, I think.
You're supposed to be drinking it, Lulu.
It happens to all elephants, no doubt.
Alex, thank you very much indeed. Can you?
Yes, maybe I'll just stand back a little bit. Oh, dear.
Well, I think we're going to see
Oh, she wants to
all sorts of very exciting, new and different things when we're in Ceylon.
Here she comes. Look out.
He doesn't want to leave us. Hello.
Here, off you go.
Bye-bye,
It's
Lulu.
lucky, don't they?
Well, as I was saying, we'll see all sorts of very exciting things.
I should go that way. I should go that way.
I should leave it here to
Get
have
her
a
in
drink,
house, I
Alex.
guess.
It's a funny thing about the series, actually, because like a lot of people, I grew up watching it, and it was a big deal when either someone joined or someone left, and especially when one of the pets passed away as well. That was front page news, wasn't it? It was a big deal at the time.
I'm sure it was. I mean, I think our audience generally, I mean, the time I was in it, 10 and a half years, well, over the 12 years that the group of us, there were only 4 presenters in that time. And that gave tremendous continuity for the audience. So we overlapped probably 3 generations of people going back who we were the core team. So that was, obviously people get attached to the presenters, and they know the ones that they grew up with. Obviously, you're too young to have seen me in the show. You might have seen clips, or you obviously have. But yeah, I mean, there were times, and people sort of defined their lives to a certain extent about who were Blue Peter presenters at the time that they watched it. It was an incredibly popular show. I mean, in the summer, we were still getting 5.5 million viewers. And in the winter, we were getting 8.5 million viewers. And this is at 5:05 in the afternoon. So, I mean, phenomenal figures. So, yes, it was a good time. People, and they seemed to like us. The audience seemed to like us. They were divided between Magpie and Blue Peter, but we saw Magpie off in the end. They couldn't really compete. The danger there, of course, was that we were always after the same material. Because there's only a limited number of things you can do in a live magazine program which are current and popular and interesting. So, you know, if we went on a Monday and they were on a Tuesday, we had nabbed most of the best things that they could do on the Tuesday. But when we went on I think they preceded us, of course, on the Friday before our show on the Monday. They had the advantage again of picking up some rather good things on the show that we weren't able to cover. So I mean, that was the only conflict. And I mean, I met some of the people on Magpie at that time, a long time ago. I liked them all, and you know, very nice people. Just happened to be a different show.
Yeah. No, I am actually of an age. You were on my BBC Blue Peter episodes at the time, so it was you and John and Valerie. So I remember that. So I'm 55.
Oh right, yeah, you just fit into the age group. Yeah,
Yeah, just.
And I'm 85 now, so you know that's time catches up with everyone.
So how did it work on Blue Peter in terms of rehearsals? Did you manage to have a few run-throughs before they filmed it?
Well, it was live. So I mean, yes, it was recorded, but you know, it went out live, and it was never repeated. We rehearsed from 10:30 in the morning until we opened the show at 5 past or 10 past 5, whatever it was.
Yeah,
and that was it. So we only rehearsed on thing. Everything else, there was invariably there'd be a film during the course of it, which gave us a break. But it was just live. And we, in some cases, you know, when you got difficult things to present, occasionally we would record that in the morning. If it was a big item that required a lot of the studio and that was space and everything, then we probably record it in the morning. But it was done as live. I can't recall us ever, when we recorded that segment, I can't ever recall us shooting it again. So it was never, oh, that was a mess, we're going to do it again. If it was a mess, that's what went out. So, I mean, it was live to all intents and purposes. And it was a very highly produced show. I mean, there was a vision mixer in the gallery cutting on individual words in the script. So if, you know, you're showing something, you say, if you want to take a look at this. Now, just then I brought it into the picture. But if I did that on there, they wouldn't be able to see it because I'd have been past the bit. So I was saying, if you take a look at this, it's there a little bit early so the cameraman could actually get the close-up shot of whatever it was as soon as you said this. You know, there were things like that, very precise. And we had to learn the script. There was very little ad-libbing. There was some, and some interviews just, you know, they went the way they did, but we even rehearsed the interviews. And Biddy was often very strict about the questions that were asked. That used to irritate me like mad. I always felt it was a bit silly. We shouldn't be doing that. But the show was a huge success, and it was largely because of her, not in spite of her. So, you know, I have to give credit where it's due.
So the two dogs, like Petra and Shep, they always seemed really well behaved on the show. Was that the case?
Say that again. Missed that.
Sorry, the two dogs that I remember, Petra and Shep, they always seemed quite well behaved on the show. Were they?
No, not always. Petra didn't like the studio very much, and she'd been on the program when I joined. And after about 6 months, Billy Baxter suggested if I would discuss it with my family, and would I take over Petra, because if I had her at home, she maybe would come into the studio and would like it a bit better. Yeah. And that was the case. So you probably always saw Petra was very well behaved by my feet. She was invariably there. And she would sit there quite comfortably and be happy because she was with me, because I brought her into the studio and I was going to take her home after the show finished. So that was very good. Shep was much more lively, but before that, Johnny had a dog called Patch, who was Petra's puppy, one of Petra's puppies. He sadly died. He picked up something poisonous when we were out filming on the canals. We think it was probably rat poison or something that got him, and so he sadly died. But he wasn't always terribly well behaved, and I remember us having Colin Hicks from the Hollies in the studio demonstrating the first non-cabled electric guitar. Oh wow! You know, we were in serious.
The lead guitarist of the Hollies, Tony Hicks. And here we go. Hello, Tony. John, would you like to give us a demonstration of that?
Should I wander about the studio and
just have a little tinkle with it and see what you can make? Works. That was marvellous.
Just a little
like to do another circle again.
Oh, Pat! That's good. Oh, she's written me true. Oh my God.
Pat, she's only playing.
And so he's wandering around the studio, and Shep decided to take a dislike to him and had a go at him when ripped his trousers. And he was in some rather nice, smart velvet trousers, looking very cool indeed, until Shep got him by the bum. And that was, yeah. So no, they weren't always terribly well behaved. But Petra, I trained quite well. I mean, she was a good dog in lots of ways. And I used to do obedience control, distant control with, you know, get her to go and sit over there and wait until I called her and all that sort of thing. And she did that very well. And she was normally a very good animal. And I mean, I enjoyed her company. She was 15.
Yeah. It's a shame, isn't it? It's I remember the dog really well. It's I was surprised that you never got any sort of big film roles during that time. Was there a reason for that? Did you have to? Was it because of your BBC contract or anything like that?
What do you mean outside of Blue Peter?
Yeah. Sorry, yeah.
It was on an exclusive contract. We weren't allowed to. Not only that, we weren't allowed to do commercials or anything. We weren't allowed to take advantage of our popularity, which again, it's another great bone of contention, which I won't go into now. But that's it. I mean, there's so many things that were wrong about the job, except it was a job and it was permanent employment. But the BBC never acknowledged it. We were freelance, never paid a penny in pensions. I've never had a penny in pensions from anybody that I've ever worked for. Never. It's just the way thing was. Freelancers were supposed to fend for themselves, and it was never terribly easy because you work spasmodically. I mean, Blue Peter was a nice long chunk, 10 years, but I never earned money doing that. I only had enough for about 3 months to survive after I left. So, how do you put lots of money away in a pension fund? I could never do that, and never have been able to. And at the moment, I mean, you suffer for it in the end. But that's what happens with freelancers. And as a young man, you tend not to be looking that far ahead, which is a shame. We should learn more than I learned. Let's put it that way.
Well, you carried on in the BBC, didn't you, for quite a long time after Blue Peter, with things like Kickstart and Crufts and the darts commentary as well.
Yes, I mean, when I left Blue Peter, I did a show for 5 years called Stopwatch, which was a sports program for kids. I also did a sort of rather nice holiday program with Sue Cook called We're Going Places, which was all these things came out of Manchester at the time. The BBC Manchester did it. And it was that got me into the darts, because I used to play darts in the BBC club at lunchtimes. And David Coleman, they just started doing darts. They did the first world championship. They invented a world championship with the British Darts Association, the BDO. And that was BBC Sport in Manchester. And David Coleman didn't want to do it after the first year. And because I played in the club, and Tony Green, who was one of the commentators, and Sid Waddell, also one of the commentators on darts, I think they mentioned me to Nick Hunter, the boss of BBC Sport in Manchester at that time. And he asked me if I would like to do it. And so I took over all the darts stuff, and it expanded because we did the British Championships. We did a knockout thing called Bullseye before Jim Bowen's Bullseye, long before. And we did on the World Championships. I was doing about 5 or 6 little shows a day, as we did links and stuff during the course of the day. So it was a good, busy time. And I did that for 7 years, 79 until 87, I think, when I decided I didn't want to do it anymore. And I think darts had passed its peak at that time. It's come back now, but not to the same degree, I don't think. I mean, darts became very big, almost as big as snooker had become.
Yeah.
Both faded rather now, and the BBC doesn't do the same coverage. I know the events are still covered on television, but not by the BBC. I mean, the BBC's coverage of sport has shrunk to almost nothing. So it's very disappointing. At least they did the Olympic Games.
Yeah. Well, you've got a new show coming out soon, haven't you? Henry House, sorry.
Henry House. Well, I wouldn't say it's coming out soon. I've got to be fair about that. I don't think now it's likely to appear before Christmas 25.
Right.
Because it's been made with private money, not a lot of it. It had to be funded just to get it done. It's now being edited, but that editing will take time, and it's a complex piece. It's a 2-hour feature-length pilot for a series, and it's about a care home. And I've got one of the leading roles in the pilot, and he'll continue for a few episodes at least, if the show ever gets taken up. And it's I said takes place in a care home, not giving anything away by saying I'm the new dementia patient at the care home. He's got mild dementia, he's got PTSD, he's a former RAF fast jet pilot, and why he's there and everything else will come out in the course of time. Some of it comes out during the first pilot. The main story, not the whole story, but the main story involving me in the pilot is that there's a new receptionist who's a bit of an airhead, and she keeps on making bad mistakes. And so essentially she's trying to keep her job. And at the same time, she forms an unlikely friendship with my character, who's called Paul. And she, in the end, I won't give anything away on what actually develops, but she becomes very important to him. Obviously, it's not a physical relationship; it's purely a friendship, and it's a very good piece. I love it. We have now shot it all, and as I say, the principal story involves that and Izzy, who's the name of the receptionist, her attempt to keep her job, which become quite problematic and quite difficult. It's played by a young girl called Orla Jones, who's an absolutely lovely actress, and I enjoyed working with her, and I thoroughly enjoyed the shoot. But now we have to wait on the edit. I'm quite impatient and anxious for it, but that makes no difference. It'll happen when it happens. I was hoping it was going to happen before Christmas 24. It needs to be around that time because it involves Christmas, part of the story. So we probably have to knock it on a year. That's the information that I have. But I haven't seen a single foot of edited play yet.
Right.
They exist, the whole thing's shot, but we now have to wait.
There's quite a lot of people in it that used to be in Doctor Who as well, isn't there?
Oh, great number.
Yeah.
Yes, Colin Spall, Annette Badland, Simon Fisher-Becker, even Colin Baker, my mate, turned up as well. Katie Manning, Carol Ann Ford. It's lovely. Colin Spall. Really good actors from Doctor Who. And they all play snippets to a certain extent. Annette has an important role, as does Simon Fisher-Becker and Colin Spall. And the others have peripheral parts which could become bigger depending on how the thing goes in the future. I mean, you can't deal with this all in episode 1, but we can introduce characters. So that's a great thing. And I'm really pleased that so many people got involved. In fact, Colin's only there for one joke, and it's a good one. So, but it's a comedy drama. Yeah, it's a comedy drama, and I won't say it's not hilarious jokes. That's not how it is. It's situations which are amusing, and it's very good too. My opinion only. I'm in it. People will judge how it is. I mean, my pleasure in it is that after all these years, I've wanted to get back into acting since I left Blue Peter, and I've never managed to do it, except doing pantomimes and the odd bits. I'm actually doing a tour this winter with Colin Baker. We're doing the Christmas Carol in various small theatres around the country for about 5 weeks. Last year we did it for 3 weeks, and we're doing it again, Christmas Carol. It's a radio play on stage, and that's fun. It's not terribly difficult because we can at least read the script, because it's interesting for people to come and see how a radio play operates. The stage is a radio studio, and it's done exactly as if we were broadcasting it. So it's a good fun thing.
Excellent. Well, thank you for this chat, Peter. It's been really, really interesting, really fascinating as always.
Thank you very much, Sean. Nice to talk to you. Take care.
Take care, mate. Thank you. Bye-bye.
There was no negotiation. Left, and I